Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. I think this phase of the MCU has not been its greatest, and I think maybe, even though this is the beginning of what's phase 5, I sort of wish they wouldn't call them phases unless they were like, I guess this is an actual phase. I wish they just said, I don't know, these are movies, whatever. But this is phase 5 to kind of kick off the whole thing with, I guess, Kang and everything like that. I mean, I think that is its primary goal, is setting up things that are going to happen in the MCU, kind of like being that piece of continuity within the larger group of it, but not being the third movie of its own franchise, which is kind of, I think, one of its biggest problems, because Ant-Man, the franchise, has its own vibe to it. And that used to be what made the MCU movies so unique, is because they would each have their own kind of personality, own genre, own vibe. Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp, the first two films, had that, and this doesn't. It doesn't have the security crew he had with him. It doesn't have Michael Pena talking real fast, being silly. He's not even in it. I wondered while watching this, this just feels like random MCU entry, and that's kind of how this whole film feels. It feels like this film that's supposed to be, you have all these people in it. It's supposed to be a big deal, but it doesn't feel like anyone involved. Like, the charisma is off. It feels like it's more about setting things up than like having what used to be cool about Marvel movies was having actually fun performances and interesting special effects. Like, I can't believe they brought that to life and stuff. All of that is like gone, and maybe it's like the cynicism or the business savvy of this whole mechanism. I'm sure there are things to like about this, but this also feels like, writing wise, something that I feel like most of this year last year I've been talking about, like films like Top Gun and Avatar, and how those films are not these cynical things, and how they're these huge hits, and not having that MCU quirky dialogue. Well, also this is written by Jeff Loveless, who's a Rick and Morty writer, who, even that, I feel like culturally, and not because of the Justin Roiland thing, I would have said this regardless of that happening, that's even not as cool as it used to be. And this isn't like it needs to be cutting edge or something. It just feels like none of these things are gelling together, and it almost feels like, if you're going to defend the MCU and the Ant-Man films, particularly this film and all of it, this is not a shining example of what it is doing. It's more of a shining example of like how bad this has certainly gotten, and it's kind of like forgetting what made these things special in the first place, or how to continue to make them special in perpetuity like they would like to. It is a neat idea. The whole idea of this movie is that Ant-Man, the Wasp, his daughter, who's played by Katherine Newton, who's the third actress to play his daughter, they get sucked into the quantum realm pretty early in the film, and then they're in the quantum realm. They're shrunk down really little in this weird, very tiny universe that we can't even see, where Janet Von Dyne was stuck all this time. And then they go down there and find out about Kang, and like sort of some backstory and all sorts of weird creatures. It just doesn't feel as original and surprising and cool. None of the creatures are that different. Most of the weird, quirky dialogue from them really feels like Rick and Morty. I am curious, by the way, did they is Dan Harmon too of a loose cannon to actually hire him and then hire these other people? It just feels like often I'm like, did you not get along with him? Why aren't you just getting him? I don't understand that. We have what we have, I guess. It feels like a lot of these things used to be really cool and exciting, and this just, we haven't had a lot of great ones. Although I like Wakanda Forever, but I think this one particularly, it might have had some cool special effects sequences, but it's weird when they're in front of a green screen and none of the actors feel like they want to be there. None of the actors have much charisma together whatsoever. You have a character who is one of the titular characters, literally it's called Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she barely matters to this thing. I don't know, it's because of the anti-vax stuff. I don't know if it's because like this is clearly written as more of an Ant-Man movie, and maybe like they should have not called it Ant-Man and the Wasp. Or like, no, we do that now. And it's like, I mean, I guess, but would it matter to anyone either way? I don't think so. I do think the stakes in this, like, you know, you keep recasting the daughter, but I don't think she was particularly great, but it also felt like no one had great charisma with her. It felt like Michael Douglas didn't want to be there. Michelle Pfeiffer is, you know, tried harder, and this really feels off. It just feels like you do need to see this to see more MCU stuff, and it feels like you're buying, in the old days, like you're buying a comic because you know it's setting up a big crossover that's about to happen, and you're like, this is a weird fucking comic, I'm not buying another one of these, but you know, I have it so I can look back when this thing happens, and maybe there's certain elements to that, but it really, you know, it's sad because I actually sort of like Peyton Reed. He's done some stuff I like The Breakup, Down to You, Bring It On. And he is interesting visually. I actually had Bill Pope shoot this, which I don't think you could tell. I know he last shot Shang-Chi, which had some stuff, but this is even less. It just feels like a Hollywood movie shot in front of a green screen. Like, so the cinematography never feels that alive or exciting. And I don't know why you'd have someone as interesting as Bill Pope shoot this. Is like pretty stupid. I don't really understand it. Maybe he's getting paid better. Good for him. This movie sort of doesn't excite me as much. It doesn't feel like I think Doctor Strange or the Eternals have this kind of like weird old like sci-fi movie nobody at my school would like, but I would watch on a weekend and like to imagine all the worlds and stuff that caused it. And this is like, I'm not excited by the world of the quantum realm. It just feels like I'm in a sci-fi world but small and stuff. And like, I already have the Guardians of the Galaxy for that. One thing I did think about watching this is, you know, in 2014, two of the big MCU movies were Captain America Winter Soldier and the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and those are very different films, talking about very different genres, very different characters. I don't know what necessarily separates this from something like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, except I think this is the much worse film, where it's more about being an MCU entry than it is about being an entry in its own franchise, and that used to be something that sort of mattered to the overall thing, was that you could watch 3 Captain America movies and follow it. You didn't necessarily need to watch the Avengers movies. I mean, it would help, but same with the Iron Man films, same with the Thor films, but I think, like, you know, you look at the Spider-Man ones and you kind of need to know some stuff, and it seems to have gotten worse and worse, and maybe because these characters, Doctor Strange and Ant-Man, aren't like the most popular ever or anything. You know, you had someone like Sam Raimi, and he was able to do some cool stuff with it, but in this, it's just like, I don't know if like the quantum realm, I think it is where the MCU needed to go, but it is not necessarily where Ant-Man needed to go in this movie, and it did feel like a completely different film. The tone is different, the kind of movie it is. I don't think it really worked well with Peyton Reed's sensibilities. I don't think it worked well with the Marvel stuff. It's probably one of the worst ones, and I get like why it's not doing well word of mouth wise, because even the whole MODOK thing, the special effects were awful, the reveal stunk. Like, why couldn't they just have Patton Oswalt show up? That cartoon was great with MODOK. I really love that cartoon. And then when you're watching this MODOK, it's like I don't understand like what their motivation was behind it. What was to tie these 3 films together? Like, I don't think you would want to watch the 3 Ant-Man films together. They make like no sense to you. And it feels like they sort of know that, like, this whole streaming ideas, you'll watch these in order or something, which feels very cynical. I was definitely sort of let down. I was definitely like, this is a definite off movie. And not in like, I think people were nicer to Wakanda Forever because decisions they had to make and so forth. This just feels like they made sort of a bad movie. It's a bad example of like modern writing, like hiring a cool Rick and Morty writer, doing the MCU way. And it's not just because they're outdated and not cool, it's because it just feels like all of these styles like not working together, and maybe they should be sort of reevaluated. Like, why aren't they asking the guys to do the Venture Brothers, for example? But also, yeah, maybe you need to see this to understand Kang, but the whole thing with Kang was better explained in Loki than this. Why did I see this? Like, if it's like not good and it's not an Ant-Man movie and it's supposed to be for the greater good of the MCU, but you've already sort of done it better somewhere else, like, what's almost the point of it, which isn't not a good feeling. feeling of the whole thing. Like, I'd seen Loki and I was like, what was Kang's deal? And then I was like, oh, right, in that episode I watched, it's just they explain it so poorly. I do think Jonathan Majors is a good actor, but I don't think anyone's really that great in this movie. Yeah, I would say it's one of the worst of the MCU films. I think maybe Love and Thunder might be worse because it like tries to be a deeper movie than it can ever be, whereas this is just like feels like a failure of a lot of styles that like people have sort of grown out of. It's probably not even like that notable at failing, which makes it really uneventful. You know, the whole ideas of it and the quantum realm thing didn't feel as imaginative. We've seen special effects before, but you know, going into the quantum realm and then you're talking about multiverses and all these things, and it just feels like a bit much and not very well explained. And like, there was already a show that did that. I kind of even question like, why have a Ant-Man 3 at this point? I don't know. Paul Rudd it's definitely a weaker performance from him. He definitely picks like movie star stuff. I sort of wish he'd do just a good comedy performance or something at this point. But you know, I don't know whose necessarily fault it was. I probably should have known, because in my movies Peyton Reed almost directed video, I got so much hate for him. I was a little surprised, but after watching it, I'm like, I'm not going to write in comments how horrible he is, but I do feel like this is one of his worst directed films. It feels like a film he lost control of, and like, you know, whether it's the Chapek era or whomever, they just sort of, you know, insisted this is, you know, the vision, the corporate vision of what an Ant-Man movie should be, but it really doesn't feel exciting. It really doesn't feel different. It just feels like same old for the MCU, and almost feels like not really good enough at this point. I wish the stakes had been delivered better. I wish it had mattered more. I wish the Kang thing had worked better. It just feels like sort of kind of routine and not exciting, and kind of like, you know, I don't even think Kang was, I thought the entrance of Kang in Loki was again a lot better, and in this I'm not really feeling as scared or excited. Kang was never someone as cool for me. It has felt for a while that they're kind of between this thing where like Endgame's over, we did that, almost like they're waiting for Fantastic Four and X-Men, like they like, when's Doctor Doom showing up, when's Magneto showing up? That's what we all want to see, and we're sort of waiting for that. And in the meantime, here's Kang. I think Jonathan Majors can do a good job. They just need to explain this stuff quicker. Having this whole alien weird world and having it come off as blandly as it does, like, I don't even like care, like having some of these, you know, people have read minds and doing all this weird stuff, but like, what does it mean to any of it? And like, because it doesn't mean much to the story, it doesn't connect to you. It's just kind of like a poorly written, poorly directed, kind of poorly made big blockbuster that just happens to be an Ant-Man movie, and also Wasp, I think. If you like the MCU, this is another entry, you'll be fine with it. This is not a big crossover one. It missed the point of the franchise it was making. It missed the point of what made these films different and so hugely successful and all that stuff. It just kind of needs to do what it needs to do and be this big sort of blockbuster Ant-Man movie, but I think what probably works the least about it is it really just doesn't work overall for what these characters are doing. It's sort of like the MCU did what it needed to keep the plot moving, and I guess if that matters more than actually having a good movie, I would consider this a success. This is one you probably could just read about later and don't really need to see. I think maybe they should be thinking more towards the future rather than getting a bunch of cool current people to kind of replicate either past successes or sort of bring that energy that's already sort of out the door to the MCU. They used to be good at getting people right as they were blowing up, like Cool or James Gunn or something like that. And this just feels like they're just trying to replicate a lot of successes and sort of just doing a big movie because they need to. And I don't think any of that came out very well at all. And especially for a time period where people are questioning that more than ever, it makes you really think maybe it's time to sort of be thinking of something else. And that's not really something you should be thinking right when you're setting up a big, huge phase of the MCU that's leading to a new Avengers. And you're sort of, thinking about, is this all really worth it if I'm just, watching a mindless blockbuster that I don't necessarily care about anymore, and these actors don't even care to make these characters pop and become alive like they used to. What exactly am I watching, and why am I watching it? And I don't think Quantumania makes you leave thinking like, you know what, I was wrong, these are a lot of fun. It just made me think like, well, that's another one. And that's not honestly a very good feeling, to just being stuck in a cinematic universe, hoping one day it maybe sort of means something to you. So if you've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.